So we're about to learn how to classify compounds and identify compounds. One of the major things you're going to need to do is to memorize the monoatomic ions and the polyatomic ions. We're going to start with the monoatomic ions first because I need you to basically take half a day for each of them to start memorizing. So we're going to start with the nonmetals. So our nonmetal ions are hydrogen. Remember, it is a nonmetal. It's going to have a positive 1 charge. Its name just stays hydrogen. The rest of them will be changing their name, and they're going to have a negative charge. They are fluoride, chloride, bromide, iodide, oxide, sulfide, nitride, and phosphide. Notice that all of the names have ended with IDE. Be particularly careful about oxide. It's not oxygenide, sulfide, again not sulfuride, and nitride, and phosphide, which is not phosphoride. So be careful about how they are named. We're going to be using them later in another system, but for now, these are our monoatomic ions. Notice that only hydrogen has a positive charge. All of the other nonmetals have negative charges. Also notice that the charges can vary. So we have fluoride, chloride, bromide, and iodide all have negative 1 charge. Oxide and sulfide have a negative 2 charge, and nitride and phosphide have a negative 3 charge. Part of memorizing these ions is to know what charge goes with which element. Before we go on, we should remember how to find our metals versus our nonmetals. So we're going to draw that stair-step line in. And now we have that. And next you want to figure out which side are the metals and which side are the nonmetals. So we have the metals on the left, nonmetals on the right. And again, we don't include the noble gases. They are a separate set. The charges on noble gases are always 0 because they don't need any more electrons. Then we look at group 7, so we're going to count backwards here. Group 7 needs 1 more electron, so they get a negative 1 charge. Group 6 needs 2 more electrons to get to 8, and so they get a negative 2 charge. And group 5 needs 3 more electrons to get to 8 electrons, and so they get a negative 3 charge. And that's how you can remember what the charges are of these nonmetals. Now let's look at the metal ions, the monoatomic metal ions. So what we're going to see here is that there are 2 types in general. We have lithium, sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, strontium, barium, aluminum, silver, and zinc. Now all of those have only 1 charge, so I don't say anything different in their name. They just use their common name. Because we know what the charge should be, we don't have to tell you the actual charge. On the other hand, we'll see the ones with lead, tin, antimony, nickel, cobalt, copper, mercury, and gold, and all of those have 2 possible charges. I'm going to show you how to know what the charge is for the ones that have only 1 charge and what the 2 possible charges are for the ones that have 2 possibilities. On this list, we have some really super easy ones. We'll start with those first. You should be able to add this group into the rest of your ions. Within 15 minutes, you should have this memorized. You should be able to have memorized this set using a periodic table. So anything in group 1A that includes lithium, sodium, potassium, but also includes rubidium, cesium, francium, and even hydrogen, will always have a +1 charge when it is an ionic species. Remember, as an element, all of these atoms have 0 charge, but when they have an ion, that means they have a charge. So we're looking at group 1A, all of them will have a +1 charge in their ionic form. Group 2A all have +2 charges. So that's your beryllium, magnesium, calcium, strontium, barium, and radium. The only ones we really work with are magnesium, calcium, strontium, and barium. So rather than memorizing this, the easiest way to do this is to have a periodic table and write +1 above the group 1A and +2 above group 2A. It makes it much easier for you to find those charges without having to memorize them. You may want to make flashcards, and that will help you to know them faster, so the test will go faster for you. But you can always use the periodic table as a backup check. The next three we're going to look at are easy to find. So group 3A, we would expect to have a +3 charge. The only one that we study in this class is aluminum, so we're only going to focus on the aluminum. Then as you go down at an angle, you'll see zinc and silver. Zinc has a 2+ charge and silver has a +1 charge. And if you look at the top, the numbers on their group numbers are 1B and 2B. but only silver and zinc have one possible charge. The other elements in these two groups have more than one possible charge, and we will discuss those later. So for the metals, other than group 1A and 2A, the three that have set charges are aluminum, zinc, and silver. Again, when you get your periodic table on your test, you might want to circle that so that you can remember, oh yeah, those ones only have one possible charge and do not require a parentheses and Roman numeral. So that's all of them for the ones that have only one possible charge. It should take you about 15 minutes to memorize these additional three. Add them into your list on your flashcards and start memorizing those ions. The next groupings will all have two possible charges and will need to be indicated what the charge is using parentheses and Roman numerals. So let's continue on with using the periodic table to tell us what the charges might possibly be. If we continue on, we go to group 4. Now we're only looking at the ones that are metals, so that would be germanium, tin, lead, and flerovium. We're only going to be looking at tin and lead in this case. We're going to see that if it's a group 4, it should have a +4 as one of its possible charges. It ends up that anything with a +4 could also have a +2 charge. So the two common charges, anything with a +4, could also be +2, and that's how we remember it. Again, the names will be lead 2 and lead 4, but written in Roman numerals, and tin 2 and tin 4, written in Roman numerals. So be aware that you must indicate the charge anytime you use lead or tin, and you must indicate it using the Roman numerals. So let's go on to group 5. Now in group 5, we know that some of them are going to be negatively charged. Those are the nonmetals, like nitrogen and phosphorus, will have a -3. Arsenic is a little bit weird. Sometimes you'll see it with a -3 charge, and sometimes you'll see it with a +3 charge or a +5 charge. And that is because it is a metalloid. In this class, we're not going to be dealing with arsenic at all, so you don't have to worry about it. When we look at antimony and bismuth, we would expect them to have a +5 charge, along with moscovium. They should all have a +5 charge by looking at the fact that they're in column 5. But with anything that has a +5 could also be a +3. Again, we're only going to be focusing on antimony, so you just remember antimony is +5 or +3. You should spend another 15 minutes or so adding these into your list of ions you've memorized. Remember, you are free to use the periodic table while you're doing these ions, but the faster you can do these, the better things will go for you as you're naming compounds later on, because you'll be using these ions a lot. Now we're going to look at our transition metals. In this section, we're only going to focus on iron, nickel, and cobalt, and we're going to see that all of those have either +2 or +3 as their charges. So we'll get iron 2 and iron 3, nickel 2, nickel 3, cobalt 2, and cobalt 3. How do you know which one I'm talking about? You'll see which one it is by the parentheses with the Roman numeral inside. So those three are fairly basic, always 2 or 3 in this region. You should spend another 15 minutes adding these 6 ions, these 3 elements, 6 ions into your list of ions, and continuing to practice the ones that you've already learned. And this section gets a little trickier. We have group 1B and 2B. Remember that silver always has a +1 charge, and zinc always has a +2 charge because of that diagonal line, as I mentioned, so we know that those charges are only one possibility. That leaves us the rest of the section. So we look at copper, and it's column 1B. It has a +1 as one of its possibilities. And we look at gold down below, and we see that one of its choices is also +1. So we have copper and gold can both be +1, but copper is 1 and 2, gold is 1 and 3. It's a little bit hard to remember, but the way I remember it is I know my 1, 2, 3, my silver, zinc, and aluminum, and I know that copper is 1 and 2, and then I go down and I look at the third row, and that's gold, so I make it as 1, 2, 3, so it's 1 and 3. No great way to remember it, but it helps me a little bit. Then we look at the last section. We're going to look at just Mercury. So Mercury is a really odd one. Now Mercury has 2 possibilities. They are Mercury 1 and Mercury 2, but notice that they both have a 2+ charge. Where they differ is that Mercury 1 has a 2 subscript. That means that anytime we find Mercury 1 in an ionic compound, it always comes as a pair. It'll always have that 2 subscript as a part of it. It is actually considered a polyatomic ion, but we haven't talked about those yet. Those 2 mercuries are joined together so that the total charge is 2+. Each individual mercury has a +1 charge. Let me show you what I mean. So here we write Hg2 with its 2+ charge. Now I'm going to split those up. So I have an Hg bonded to another Hg, and each one of them gets a +1 charge. We are calling it Mercury 1 because each of the atoms of mercury has a +1 charge. But they always come as a pair, so it is really written as Hg with a subscript 2 and a superscript 2 plus. Each one has a +1 charge. The total is 2+. So let's put that all together. First we'll start with group 1A. Group 1A, always +1. Group 2A, always +2. Group 3A, always +3, but we're only going to look at aluminum. Once I see that aluminum, I remember to go down to zinc, which is a +2, and silver, which is a +1. We're going to go on to column 4. Column 4 has the choice of +4 or +2, so 4 and 2. Column 5 will be 5 and 3 positives. If we look above, if it's a nonmetal, we know it's going to be -3, then -2 for the next one, and -1 at the end. And of course the noble gases get 0. That just leaves us a few of them in the middle, and so that is our 3 in the middle, which is iron, cobalt, and nickel, which are all +2 and +3. And then the more challenging ones, we have copper, which is +1 and +2, gold, which is +1 and +3, and then the hardest one, which is mercury, and that was both +2, because they're in column 2B, but one of them is called Mercury 1 and the other one is Mercury 2. Recall Mercury 1 has a subscript 2, meaning there's 2 mercury atoms there. So that is everything summarized onto this table, and it should make it easier for you to recall things when it comes to test time. So on the test, you'll want to make that on your table. When you come to the test, your table must be blank, but when you get the actual test, you can start writing those into the table so that you're ready for the test.